Africa, especially West Africa, where we are, will not actually experience growth, investment, foreign direct investment in the direction that we expect if we don't tackle the problem of insecurity. Why? Because money is a coward. It does not go to where it does not feel secure. It's a big coward, what you call money. And money is what you use to develop a whole lot of places. In his literally masterpiece, what they call Things Fall Apart, the late Professor Chinua Achebe narrates the pulsating story on how things fell apart in a part of Nigeria they call Igbo land. I've taken pains to understudy that in the global stage today. Post-COVID-19, a lot of things had fallen apart. In this fictional story, it was like a fiction, which is one of the most globally celebrated by an African writer. It was an Igbo land metaphor for what transpired in the whole of Africa today. The story is set in the late 19th century, but a century and a half after, Africans appear to still lack the capacity to gather what fell apart. And today, post-COVID-19, the whole world is affected. The whole world is still trying to see how they can fix a whole lot of things that have fallen apart because of COVID-19. The aviation industry changed completely because of September 11 in the US. That was when we now started seeing where you cannot travel, even with your shaving powder or so many things. But COVID-19 had dealt a major devastating blow. And I'm happy that's what we're trying to look at. And come out with a continent that would do credit to the late poet. I just love this poet, David Diop's. His patriotic sentiment of an African being splendidly alone. Splendidly alone. If you read that poet, you could see. He was talking about we taking charge of our destiny and our rightful place as a continent blessed with huge resources and striving to be economically self-sufficient. While I totally key into this, I also still discover that everybody is talking about the world as a global village, that with security, there will still be cross-fertilization of skills, of ideas, to let us achieve that. When I reviewed one time the entire minerals in Africa, I was amazed that actually what David Diop referred to here could easily be achieved. But at times too also, I look at, we might have these minerals, but at times we don't even have the technology to actually bring it from where it is. So it's a whole lot. The major part of the challenge is that ever since things fell apart, as referenced by Chinua Achebe, and Africans managed to wrest independence of their countries from colonialists, Africans have not been free in the true sense of the word. The late Zimbabwean vice president, Joshua Nkomo, was the arrowhead of the first fight against apartheid in Rhodesia, now called Zimbabwe, who was jailed for 10 years for his civil rights activism, but put in a soberly manner. He said, one of the hardest lessons of my life has come to me late. It is that a nation can win freedom without its people becoming free. President George Bush also identified with Nkomo's sentiments when he now narrated that political sovereignty is but a mockery without the means of meeting poverty and literacy and disease. Self-determination is but a slogan if the future holds no hope. This is where we find ourselves today in Africa. This is where we are trying as much as practicable to see what we can do. We've all talked about independence in Africa, but are we really independent is the main issue. These sentiments taken together define the essence of our gathering today. We are trying to actually chart a course for us. Societies can only fly to freedom on the twin wings of security and good governance. That's what I've come to understand. Any society in Africa today will only get to that freedom, will only get to that, fly to that, under security and good governance. Good governance here, according to the Council of Europe, is the responsible conduct, I want to quote very well, is the responsible conduct of public affairs and management of public resources. The Council holds that 12 principles underpin good governance. These are: 1, fair conduct; 2, fair conduct of elections. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Fair conduct of elections, representation, participation, responsiveness, efficiency and effectiveness, openness and transparency, rule of law, ethical conduct, competence and capacity, innovation and openness, sound financial management, human rights, culture, diversity, social cohesion, and accountability, etc., etc. If you put all this together, these are the ingredients in which you find in good governance. And they have a handshake. Where you find good governance, it is very likely that a good governance will also provide, because the first social contract of good governance is security of life and property. That's the first social contract. And no matter what, you see that in the same vein, Mo Ibrahim Foundation states that governance is the provision of political, social, and economic public goods and services that all citizens rightfully expect from their government. The question there is, looking at these ingredients, have we actually achieved that in Africa? And I feel so challenged wherever you go. Oh, Africa, we have all the basic resources. We have all that we need. The problem is leadership. I beg to differ that the problem is not only leadership. The problem is also followership. Africa, we also have a challenge of followership. In Africa, they make governance extremely difficult because that sense of ownership is not just there in us, like in other places. We must own the government. We mustn't see the government as only those in the public service. If I talk out of experience, I never knew until I became a governor that a transformer that can supply electricity to a community can be vandalized by 1 or 2 people and leave the whole community in darkness. You can only find that in Africa. You install something for the whole community that will benefit thousands of people. Just 1 or 2 people will go and drain the oil, and then the thing will run dry and then get burnt overnight. And the rest, the resources that would have been used for something else, is now used to represent that, to replace that. So while we must look at these ingredients, you could see it's interwoven between what the leadership must do and then what the followership must also do. It's like being in a commercial vehicle. The driver must be allowed to concentrate to drive. If the passengers inside are busy pulling his hair, drawing his shirt, which is what we find in Africa, certainly the pull-down syndrome in Africa makes it extremely difficult for us to also achieve good governance. And also the mixture, we need to also look at as a people, as Africans. While a whole lot of African countries, we try to, with due respect, we try to look at the constitution of other places and just think we can adapt to our own. I think the day we have our own original, well-written, environment-induced, diagnostic approach to our constitutional drafting and implementation, I think will also help us a whole lot.